Hi there, welcome to the Lament course. This is session 3, Metaphor. And in parts 1 and 2, we've said that a healthy faith is always honest about our responses to our experiences. And so we talked about being exiles because we're exploring Lamentations and this incredible book in the Bible that deals with this thing we call lamenting. And the first thing that it does is it shows us that there's got to be an honest reality about what's going on. Lamentations is all about this time when the Babylonians came in and overthrew Jerusalem and the city was ransacked and everybody got taken off as slaves or killed. And so we said that a healthy faith is always honest about our responses to our experiences. And session 2 was all about denial, and now that's really an unhealthy response to our experiences. And so the opposite of denial, of course, is facing up to reality. But the question is, how do we do that? How do we give language to that? How do we start to express our interior life and our responses and our feelings and our emotions? Well, in Lamentations, in chapter 1, the narrator talks about Jerusalem, the city that's been destroyed, as a woman. But then he uses all sorts of different words. So chapter 1 and verse 1, how deserted lies the city once so full of people. How like a widow is she who once was great among the nations. She who was queen among the provinces has now become a slave. And then later on he talks about her being a mother. So it's a city, but yet it's a slave and a widow and a queen and a mother, which in one sense kind of doesn't really make sense. But what you find through Lamentations is that you get this poetic language, you get image and metaphor and picture. And Lamentations is quite unique in that sense. There are books in the Bible that are history books, like Chronicles. If Chronicles was telling you about this time, it would say, or the other books that do, it would say, in the year that so-and-so was king, this month and this day, this army came in with this many people and they attacked this gate and they went through this entrance and this fell first and there were this many people dead. There would be a very factual account of it. When I was 30 years old, my first wife, Ange, passed away suddenly and unexpectedly. And the basic facts of it are that we went to sleep one night, we said good night, it was a nice evening, we'd not fallen out, and I woke up in the early hours of the morning to find her fitting in somewhere, and in the end, and then I rang 999 and did mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and CPR until the ambulance came, and then we went to the hospital, and then she was declared dead, and then I went home and I told my 3 young boys. That's the facts of the situation. But it doesn't tell you how I felt. It doesn't tell you how it impacted me. It doesn't tell you the impact it had on my young boys. It says nothing about my response to it. You see, to lament is to share how you feel, how you responded, which isn't possible using a logic, reason and facts, because when you suffer, when you go through difficulty, when you go through trial, literal language fails you. So the narrator to Lamentations uses experiences people could relate to and places them alongside the current pain to give expression to it. How like a widow is she? Well, what brings to mind a widow? Loss, grief, pain. She who was once a queen is now like a slave. That's a fall from grace. Once in charge, once queen, once ruler over all, to now just a slave. Do you see how powerful metaphor can be? An image, even when used against a city. A couple of weeks before my first wife Ange passed away, I was in Palermo, Sicily, with Paul. There's a church in Palermo that the church I lead relate to, and Paul oversees them all apostolically. And we were there ministering and teaching, and for a long weekend, I think it was, and halfway through, one of the guys in the church here in Shipley sent us both a picture, and mine was a picture of a storm going on a ship. And this ship was in this horrific storm, getting tossed to and fro, super high waves, super windy, very scary. But in this picture, the captain and the men of the ship were safe. And even though it was storming, even though they were getting tossed about, they were going to come through it on the other side. Which didn't mean anything to me when I received it. But a few weeks later, it meant everything to me. Because suddenly, yeah, that's how I feel. That was metaphor, it was picture, it was image, and it was a brilliant way to describe, yeah, that's it right there. During lockdown, a number of people commented to me that they felt like a caged bird that time in our past when we couldn't leave our homes and we could only meet certain people and you couldn't go to shops and restaurants in kind of 2020 and 2021. Of course, they were not a caged bird, but it means something. Instantly it connects. Oh yeah, that's it. Because metaphor works. Think about phrases like, I've had my heart ripped out, I've been kicked in the stomach, or I've been stabbed in the back. Powerful. We don't mean somebody literally took a knife and stabbed us, but they said something or did something. And it's this metaphor and language that just gives voice to something that by just saying, well, this person said this to me, doesn't really do it justice. You see, to learn to lament is to learn to focus on the expression, not the analysis. It's this movement from what happened to our response to what happened. There's the factual retelling of the event, and then there's the internal response to that event. It's moving from perhaps denial of it or just factual expression of it to actual expression of our response. And it's absolutely vital that we find a way to express that response. I mean, you ask any modern psychologist and they will tell you that denial of events is not a healthy psychological way to live. It's not healthy emotionally, spiritually, physically. And of course, we all do that in different ways. Maybe you write, maybe you draw, maybe you paint, maybe you dance, maybe you sing, maybe you make music, maybe you journal, maybe you talk, maybe you do whatever it is, but we've got to find a way to express it. Because for some of us that's harder than others. Some of us have been taught for years and years that we're just meant to bury it all down. But in truth, it doesn't work. Some of us are super expressive and creative and wear our hearts on our sleeve and we tell everybody everything about how we're feeling, which is probably not also too helpful all the time. But we've got to find ways to do it. For me, I love to write. I like words, so I have a literal physical journal that I just physically write in. It's just full of my scribble. And sometimes it's about what's going on and what's happening or where I am, and then it turns into prayers and it's just me going, hey. I know a friend of mine, he types it all up on his iPad. He's got all these notes full of just everything that is going on. Faye loved to talk initially, certainly in the early years of our marriage, and she was just, well, we were both getting used to sharing. She'd just talk, and in the talking she'd find it. And then there was a time we went through a really tough patch in our marriage a number of years ago, and she sat at a piano because she writes songs and leads worship, and she wrote this incredible song about how God was a lighthouse in the midst of a storm. And again, all this metaphor of crashing against the rocks and how God's there and it's distant and it's there. And that's the beautiful thing, you see. In the expressing of it, we must also be real about where we see God in it. Because God is in it. But we must express where we see him in it. Not where we think we should see him in it, but where we actually see him in it. If God feels distant, that's fine. If God feels miles away, that's fine. If it feels like he doesn't care, that's fine. He can take it. Have you read the Psalms? That's what the Psalms teach us. He can take it. Because here's the thing. How you see him will not change the truth of it, because he's with you. He's in it. He's there. He's in all things, through all things, and over all things. So he is in it, and he is right there. But often when we go through this stuff, we don't feel like he's there. We don't feel like he's listening. We feel like heaven's silent some of the time. That's okay. He can take it. But if you don't express it, you can't invite him into it. Because how you see him will not change the truth of him being in it, but denying the reality of how you see him will change you. You going, well, it's all right. God says he's there, so he is there. Even though part of you is going, but where the heck is he? No, just allow the reality of it to flow. Allow the vulnerability to flow. Allow yourself to be real about him and where he is. And then, of course, the next step is to move on to thanksgiving and gratitude, and we'll talk about that later. But actually, until you've fully done part one, until you've fully expressed your response, and often metaphor is the best way to do that, you can't actually properly move on to thanksgiving and gratitude and healing and restoration. Okay, there's going to be some questions coming up on the screen in a minute. If you're in a small group, enjoy chatting with them, and let's just explore this idea. For those of you who like language, it might come easier than others. Those of you who are creative, but listen, just talk about it, talk around it, and find out where you're at in it. And with these questions, they're designed to get you thinking. They're designed to help you find out where you're at. And where you're at is fine. There's no right or wrong place to be. Where you're at is where you're at. Being honest about that is also super important. God bless.